Hello and welcome to the Plastic Spoons channel. This is Jonah, and today I'm going to be telling you guys about the one day I was a waiter. I wanted to become a waiter because it was, short explanation, I wanted to be a bartender, and I found out the best way to become a bartender is work as a waiter and then work your way up. That's why I wanted to become a waiter, and I didn't realize how bad it could be. Now, the story I'm about to tell is an extreme. I highly doubt this is something everybody experiences, and this is a rare occurrence, and I'm hoping it's a rare occurrence, because if this is an every place thing, I'm done eating at restaurants. So I found a job ad online for an Italian restaurant that was looking for a waiter or waitress. I applied, not thinking I'd get a response because I had no waiter experience beforehand. I thought I was going to go somewhere like IHOP or something. But, lucky enough for me, or unlucky enough for me, the person replied back. He's like, "Hey, can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" And I was like, "Hey, I sure can." So I went into this Italian restaurant. I walk in and I was like, "Hey, my name is Jonah. I am here for a job interview." And he's like, "Oh, let me go get this guy real quick." And this guy came out and he was Asian. Now, I'm not saying Asian people have to do Asian restaurants or something like this, but this guy was incredibly Asian. He was from a different country. I didn't ask him while I was there, but it was just a bit offsetting. The Italian restaurant, I was not expecting an Asian man. Stereotypes are what drive my life. But so he's like, "All right, come over here. We'll do the interview." So he grabs a little notebook, a pen. We go sit in some different little area of the restaurant. And oh, by the way, the restaurant is totally barren. There's like maybe one or two people eating. I don't really remember. I just remember like, wow, this is a pretty dead place. So we go to sit down, and he's asking me some general questions like experience, why I was interested, all this stuff. And then he goes on, and he's just like, "Oh, another question. Do you do drugs?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, okay. And he's just like, "Are you sure you don't do drugs?" And I was like, "Hey, man, I will take a drug test if that's what it takes to prove that I don't do drugs, but I don't do drugs." And then he's like, okay. So then he starts asking me about hours. It's like, "Are you good on this day? What are your hours?" I told him the hours, and he's like, "Okay, oh, by the way, do you do drugs?" And I was like, "No." And each time I answered the question, he seems to be more and more disappointed by my answer. Like, I don't know if there was something else going on in that restaurant that is what was making it float, Not suggesting anything. I was just confused on why he was asking that question so many times and just not being like, "I want you to go over here and take a piss test." It's odd. I didn't think that's never happened to me. I've been to a lot of job interviews, and none of them straight up was like, "Hey, do you do drugs?" They're like, "Hey, we're going to have you take a drug test because we think you might be doing drugs." That has happened, and that is understandable. But this guy, he's just like, do you do drugs? He didn't ask any like any real important questions like, "Hey, do you have a food handler's license?" Which I did not, because I didn't want to go online, waste time, and waste money to get a food handler's license just not to get a job within food. So I never got one. I would get one if I got the job. But he didn't ask that. But I did ask him if he required it, and he said, "Nah, we're good." And I was like, all right, that's some shady shit. So he's just like, "I'll let you know later. I'll give you a call or something, blah, whatever." So then one day passes, he calls me, he's just like, "Hey, can you come in tomorrow?" And I was like, all right, yeah, let's do this. So I go into the Italian restaurant, and he's like, "Here's a broom. Go sweep that area." First thing, not a hi, nothing. Just, "Here's a broom, you go sweep that area." And I was like, okay. So I go sweep the little area. I was already not digging it. But then he's like, "All right, come over here." So he hands me this little waiter apron thing or something like that. But he sets me down, and he explains the restaurant a little bit to me, like what is expected of me and the rules. Right off the back, one of the most disappointing rules for him is like, "Oh yeah, you don't work for tips." And I was like, "Oh, you mean that one thing that drives me to be a better waiter?" He's like, "Yeah, you don't get tips. If there's a tip on the table, I take it." I was like, okay, that's pretty weird. All right. And, I was kind of disappointed. And then he's just like, "Oh, another thing. Not a lot of people come in here." So that was also disappointing. I was like, oh, okay, cool, great. This is going to be a really boring job. And he's like, and so he hands me the menu. He's like, you can study up on the menu and stuff, which isn't a good way to learn what the food is like at the restaurant. It's not a good way. And he's like, here you go. You can study up. And so I'm looking at it, and he's kind of just sitting there, whatever, looking at the TV. There was a TV in the restaurant. He's just watching the TV. And then, and he's an awkward guy. He's incredibly awkward. He doesn't know how to talk to me at all. He asks me if I have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't have a girlfriend. He's just like, oh, okay, how old are you? And I tell him my age. He's like, oh, okay, so you can't date the waitress here. She's 16. You're way too old. And I was like, yeah, we're not going to try to play matchmaker here, bud. And, so then trying to change the topic, I'm like, oh, hey, have you ever tried? I mean, like, what's your favorite food to suggest? And if a customer is ever like, hey, what do you suggest for food? What would you suggest? He's like, oh, I've never tried the food here. And I was like, what the fuck? What? You have never tried the food here? He's like, nah, I mean, most of the customers that come in already know what they want. So there's no need for that. And I'm like, that's not the part that's getting me. The part that's getting me is that you've never tried the food at your own restaurant. So you can't even make sure that, like, you're okay with the quality of the food. There's a problem right there. I don't get that part. And, he does that. So then, then he just turns away, turns back at me. He's like, oh, question, do you do drugs? And I'm like, do you do drugs? And, I didn't ask him that, but he asked me that 2 times that day. That was the first time. He asked me a little bit later. Not going to bring it back up. But yeah, he asked me that, and I'm just like, why are you so curious? Like, I'm concerned at this point. And so, whatever, So after the whole finding out that he's never tried any of the food there, he's like, all right, here's a few customers. Have at it. And I'm like, have at it? Dude, I told you I don't have any experience in this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this works. I don't know the fucking rules. And he's like, that doesn't matter. It's all right. Just go over there, give them the menus, give them some water, come back, take their drink order, and then come back a little bit later and take their food order. I'm like, okay, it's a little better than just go have at it, whatever. So then I go have at it, and, it's just so weird. They didn't train me on anything. As far as, like, if the customers asked me, like, what was on, like, what came with the food or what kind of sauce came on the food, I didn't fucking know. I always had to go run back to the kitchen and ask the kitchen staff, like, hey, what goes on this? And they're like, oh, the red sauce. I'm like, great, that's perfect. It's what I wanted to know because they're asking technical terms. You're just giving me color. So I didn't get trained on anything. And I didn't know how to handle the food. The only thing they did train me on is how to make the complimentary salads that came with every food order. They're like, all right, you put the lettuce in the bowl and you put a fucking tomato on top of it, and then you grab whatever sauce that they want, and you go out there and you give it to them, and then you take their food order. And I'm like, oh, okay. Another problem, too, is I'm not very good with, like, short-term memory kind of stuff. Like, if someone's just like, remember this number, 7, and I'd be like, I'm going to forget it. They didn't give me a pen and paper to take the orders, so a lot of the times I really, really had to pay attention to what they were saying. They're like, "Oh, I'll take this." I'm like, "Can you point that out on the menu?" It's like, what is it? Because I already don't even know. Because a lot of the food title names or whatever I couldn't even pronounce, so that was weird. Well, not weird. I was an idiot, and I just don't know my Italian cuisine. So no training, nothing. And everybody that I helped that day knew right off the back. They're like, oh, you must be new. I'm like, not only am I new, but this is my first time ever doing a waiter job in all my years of life. And they're like, that sucks for you. They're just expecting you to do this by yourself. It's like, I know. Isn't it kind of stupid? And we were having a good chuckle, and they were having a good chuckle, and I was crying. And it was weird. The staff there, they were friendly. Besides the boss man, they told me his name so many times, I just could not remember it. But the boss man was just super awkward. He didn't know how to interact with me. Every time he saw me, he was like, and I was like, okay. And I kept going, trying to be as busy as possible to make the day go by faster, because I was just emotionally crushed by this restaurant job. So the staff, there was one lady there. She was nice, but she was a bit way too upfront about herself. She was just like, hey, I'm an alcoholic. And I was like, that's cool to know. This is our first day meeting. And I'm not being too exaggerative on her just being, hey, I'm an alcoholic. She flat out said it, almost with no purpose behind it. I don't know. It was weird. but like she was semi-training me on some things. She was training me on where the stuff was in the restaurants. Like, this is where the soda fountain is. And I'm like, oh, clearly. And she was telling me all this stuff about the freezer. And she's like, oh, hey, question. Boss man was going to ask you this anyway, so I'm going to ask you this now. Can you work Monday? It was Thursday that day that I went in. Like, can you work Monday morning? I'm like, Monday morning? And I was like, I mean, you do know this is my first day. He's like, yeah, but I'll make you a list of what to do. There's not a lot of customers that come in. So they're expecting me to work at a new place, open up the restaurant by myself with only not even being there for a full week, not even being trained on anything. Nothing in morning shift. I was working the night shift when I was doing it, So it was weird. It was definitely incredibly unprofessional in every which way in the word. And, another thing to mention about the day that I worked, they had me come in on a Thursday because they told me, they're like, oh, there's not going to be a lot of people coming on Thursdays. It'll be fine. The problem was with that Thursday, it was fucking Valentine's Day. It was Valentine's Day that Thursday, and everyone came in. So, I had a lot of people come in, and we were swamped, so no one could help me on anything. And the alcoholic lady just vamoosed. She left. She left because she had something to do. And boss man was like, that's okay. We have new guy and underage girl. And I was like, perfect, I mean, it was dumb. And I hated it. And it was stupid. And, I got to say, the biggest problem with working at that place was, I'm handling all this stuff in the worst way possible. And I'm touching all this shit, and, I myself, not having worked in a restaurant, was like, boy, I should probably wash my hands one of these times. And this was me maybe an hour into it. This wasn't me later in the day. This was me an hour into it. And I was like, maybe I should wash my hands because this is kind of gross, cross-contamination, everything. This is disgusting. So I go in the back, and I go to what was supposed to be the hand-washing station. I'm about to turn it off, and one of the kitchen staff's like, oh, hey, don't turn that on. Our hand-washing station does not work. And I'm like, what do you guys do for washing hands? And they're like, oh, hey, we don't wash our hands. And I was like, bleh! Fucking gross. I couldn't believe it. These kitchen staff people are so much cross-contamination, and it was disgusting. I couldn't handle it. So I was like, okay, this place will get shut down someday, and I don't want to be involved. So I remember boss man came up to me towards the end of the shift. He's like, hey, are you good to work tomorrow? And, instead of being an adult and a responsible, mature person, instead of saying like, hey, you know what? I don't think this place is for me. It's not a good fit. So instead of saying yes and not showing up tomorrow, I'm going to tell you no, and this is going to be my last day. Because I am an idiot, and I am immature. My answer was, yeah, I'll come in tomorrow. So then I was like, hey, boss man, I'm going to leave for the night because I got stuff to do. And he's like, all right, see you tomorrow. I was like, all right, see you tomorrow. I left, and I did not look back. I blocked every number and associated with that restaurant. I made sure no one could get a hold of me, and I never went back to that place ever. Oh my God, if Gordon Ramsay were to ever show up to that restaurant, it would get shut down the second he said hi. It'd be it's terrible, this place. I couldn't believe it. It was crazy. So the moral of the story is, tip your waiters. They go through so much shit. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little tale of me, the one day I was a waiter and probably will never do it again. Thank you, and have a good day.